Hello and welcome to another episode of Dental Disruptors Podcast. My name is Jake Larson. This is my co-host Clint Berry. As always, we're happy to be here, and we have another amazing guest with us. Clint and I have looked forward to this episode for weeks and weeks. As we launched this, we were like, we're going to get Jordan on here because she is amazing. Many of you may know her. I know she has a good reputation in the dental industry, especially when it comes to dental and data and all things. But yeah, this is our good friend, Jordan Trentacosta, self-proclaimed dental data nerd. So we're just really excited to have Jordan on with us. Thanks for joining us, Jordan.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So yeah, today we get to talk about all things data inside of dental, which is oddly really fun for us. At Kala, we do a lot of dental data. Clint spends many late nights validating data, building queries in BigQuery. Jordan does it in the daytime.
In the night, 1 a.m.
Yeah, sometimes at night. So yeah, it'll be fun to dive into this. So Jordan, to begin, I want to just invite you to share a little bit about yourself and your career. How did you ever get to the point? I'm sure as a little girl, you didn't dream of being a dental data nerd, right? So how did you get to where you are? How did you fall into dentistry? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
I got into dentistry because it was the only one that would hire me that had office hours, like normal banking hours, because I worked at Costco for 10 years first. And then I hurt my back and had to get spinal fusion surgery at very young, early 20s. And so I needed a job that didn't require lifting, and I got a job at a dental DSO and started as front desk, like patient coordinator, and worked my way up from there.
How long ago was that? How long ago did you start in dentistry?
13 years ago. Over 10.
That's awesome. I did not know that. So, yeah. I have met and spoken to a lot of people that have started their career at the front desk inside of a dental practice. No one else have I ever met that has landed in a data-driven career like you have. So how did the pivot go from working at the front desk, I'm assuming in reception or some sort of kind of day-to-day job like that, and now you are running reports for dozens of locations inside of a big DSO?
Yeah, it started out so front desk, receptionist, basically checking insurance, checking people in and out, all that stuff. I worked my way up through several layers, but eventually up to director of ops for a 250 location DSO. And like my favorite part of my job in ops was doing P&L analysis, which I don't think is common,
yeah.
But it was the best part of my job, and it was so much fun. And I just got contacted one day by a recruiter who was looking for someone to do analytics. And I've always had love for tech stuff. I was a WoW player growing up, and did some Python courses during the COVID closures for fun, just because I was interested in learning. Originally got into it because I was interested in crypto, and I wanted to learn like Web3 and whatever at the time. And then the very first Python basic course I did was like, here's things you can do with Python. And then I found out you could do machine learning and all this stuff. And I was like, never mind, screw crypto. I want to learn way cooler stuff than that. And then I had a recruiter reach out to me like probably a year and a half, 2 years later, who wanted to hire me for an analytics role at a startup. I'm like, there's no way I qualify for that, right? So she sends me a job description, and it's basically a copy of my resume. I was like, okay, well, turns out I do qualify. Let's do it. And so I got the job and kind of went from there. And that was in 2022, I think, 2021, somewhere in there. And it was a startup. They had 0 locations for the first 10 months I worked there. So it was a lot of M&A analytics. So we would hook into the software and put it into our analytics warehouse, our platform, and kind of pull all the reports for the targets. So for QOV, I would pull all that stuff for them because most of the doctors don't want their staff to know that they're selling. And the people who have 1 or 2 locations don't really have time to pull their own reports because it takes like 10 or 15 reports to do everything you need to do. So we would do that for them. And then I switched over where I am now and kind of built our whole analytics platform from scratch, just based on a warehouse. So we have a third party vendor who does our warehouse schema for us. And then we just build on top of that. So I do all the custom report building, the Power BI, all that stuff.
So we need to go back to earlier in your statement. You played WoW, right?
Yeah.
So for the layman, that's World of Warcraft. That's pretty
that
geeky.
went way over my head. Sorry.
Yeah, it was before the first add-on too, before the first DLC.
That's awesome. I just didn't realize we were both. I mean, I knew you were a data nerd. I just didn't realize you were that nerdy. But I'm glad
I'm a nerd. Yeah, real nerd.
That's so awesome. So, Jordan, just to help people kind of understand what this this work you're doing inside of data warehousing and analytics, and tell us a little bit about the day-to-day work that an individual doing this is taking responsibility for. You mentioned that you have a third-party warehouse, and then you're building reports off of that. Just for those that aren't super familiar with that, give us a little bit of a breakdown of what that means.
So we have, I think, 12 different PMS now, practice management software. And it's really difficult to normalize that because there's different fields that don't exist in some count different metrics different ways. You have some that are ortho specific, some that have everything. And so it's very difficult to get all of that normalized in one place. So even with a warehouse, it's very difficult to get it normalized in one place. So we have a vendor who does all of the data extraction for us, and then they put it into not really a raw format, a staging format, into their own schema that's kind of unified in one place. And then I build reports in BigQuery on top of that. So I put all of the metrics together, and basically anything that our team wants built, any metric they want to see, basically any field that you see that exists in the software UI, it's somewhere in the database. So then you have to find it, and you can build reports off of that. So anything you can think of, basically, you can build.
So how is that different than, let's say, the Dental Intel's, the practice by numbers? I like to call them the cookie cutter reports, right? But just to help kind of paint the picture, how is what you're doing different and maybe more powerful than what people might get with just those out-of-the-box reports?
Yeah, sure. Like, again, just custom stuff. Like, if you ask them to build you something they don't have exactly, or you calculate something a different way, typically not those specific ones, but just in general, typically the answer is going to be like, well, this is the way all of our customers calculate it. So this is the way it is. Whereas, like, you may not, like, for example, counting new patients. A lot of practices want to count the D1050 code as a new patient, but in reality, it's not, because it depends on how you want to calculate it. But, like, for example, you might have a limited exam come in and it's a new patient, and the marketing would like to track that. But if you're only doing the comp code, you're missing that. And you can use the comp code every 3 years for the same patient on the same insurance. So it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a new patient. So if you're using that in the kind of cookie cutter software, you're missing the actual information you're trying to get. So I think there's a lot more availability to have insights versus just like a metric. So you're like, if you know what problem you're trying to solve or what insight you're trying to get to, they can explain that to me, or I can go back and forth and kind of like talk that out to like, well, what you're looking for. So if you want an example, at one of my previous roles, I was asked by the board to give dollars per code. Like, you look at that when you're doing M&A a lot because you want to see a procedure mix. But once you're purchased and you're good to go, like, it's not super helpful unless you're tracking specific codes like implants or all-on-4s or something. But I was asked to give production by code, and then putting my product manager hat on, I did some requirement gathering and asked, like, what are you trying to get insight-wise from this? Because this seems kind of basic, boring stuff. And it ended up that they were trying to figure out like how much perio is doing and how much oral surgery is doing. And I had to explain that that's not as simple as codes, because there's all of those share codes, like hygiene trace perio codes and perio and oral surgery share codes. So that's not really helpful. And what they actually meant was line of business. So we were able to do that by provider split instead. So it would have been a lot of work to build that from scratch. in a dashboard to show dollars per code when that's not really the insight. So if you're making business decisions off of that kind of stuff, like you want to be able to customize your definitions there a little bit more.
I love the storytelling that's involved in that, right? Like it's not as simple as I want dollars per code. There's a story behind it. Hey, we want to solve this problem. And that's really what Jordan can do. People like Jordan can do. I don't think there's a lot of Jordans out there. So that's why we're excited to have her on. But like being able to understand the story and the need that the executives are trying to use to make business decisions, once Jordan understands that, can get answers to any of those stories because she can get access to the data, which is...
Yeah, I think it's important to have like a little bit of operations experience involved, not necessarily with the person building the code. I just happen to have both, but like at least somebody involved in the process. So that way you can ask those questions and explain what you're trying to look for. Because I don't think, like if somebody asks for, give me dollars per code, you're probably going to get it, okay, here's dollars per code. Instead of trying to figure out why. And if you're making business decisions based on that, like those are very different things. So you might make the wrong decision if you're just going based off of what you think you need, especially because a lot of the stuff is coming from PE firms that may not have operational experience with dental. And so they're asking for things that they think they know what they want, but then once you explain it, they're like, oh, no, not what I want. It's not what I meant.
Super fascinating. And just to layer on the components that are making this possible, there's the data extraction that you have to have, getting access to practice management software across, I think you said 13 different locations, getting that all.
No, 12 different softwares. It's like
12 different softwares.
40 something locations.
Yeah.
And then how they set them up is totally wildly different too. So like they could set them up wrong. And then it's basically the same thing as having a different software completely.
And I want to come back to that because that is such a complex puzzle to solve, to just be able to answer the question. But before we get there, I want to rewind and talk about what you have seen in the dental industry over the last, let's say, decade as you've been doing this. How has the best practices and ability to extract data and tools how has that whole thing evolved from when you first started to do this to now?
Well, so that's a hard question to answer because when I first started, I was in 2 different large DSOs that were over 200 locations each. And they were already standardized across the board in all of their software. Like as we would purchase new practices, we would convert them within like a month or 2 to our software. And so I had a much different experience. I did not realize how nuanced every single PMS was until I joined that startup. A few years back and started analytics. I never realized how difficult it was to normalize any of that stuff because I just took it for granted because I was given this beautiful set of data that was already great because it came out of one software that was, already mapped out accordingly. And so it's all the same. When you have like all the same schema from one specific software, it's much different animal than when you're trying to put all of these together and have accurate data. Because the fields are all defined the same. Everything's good to go there. You might have a few hiccups here and there because one of the things I've run into that I didn't really think about before was somebody who has recently converted and you're purchasing them after they just recently converted software. So you're seeing really bad conversion data because, maybe you weren't there to review it at the time and they didn't have anyone technical reviewing it. So you'll get like really bad conversion data. There's a couple that don't, like most of them don't convert over appointment data. So if you're trying to do new appointments by appointment status, like if it's their first completed appointment, it's going to say every single patient is a new patient for the first like year or 2. And then same thing, like with appointment history, a lot of ledger stuff doesn't come over exactly, like it'll convert production, but not collection. So if you're trying to like manually age any kind of, like trying to age AR manually, it won't have payments in there. You can't actually net it out. So it's fun. And then like some of our softwares have treatment IDs attached to payments and things, and some of them don't, where you can't line it on post. So that also makes it impossible to do for some offices. So standardizing is
some of the software is what you're saying is some of the software don't even do line item payments.
No, SoftInt specifically. SoftInt does not post anything. And I found that out after writing a very large custom report, trying to separate ortho and pedo, and finding out that that's not possible for line item accounting. So I tried to do it by code, but then it was putting everything as gross numbers for those codes. And then all the adjustments would go elsewhere because they weren't associated with the codes.
Oh,
so
boy.
Fun stuff.
Awesome. So
when you're mixed together like that and you have multiple PMS, that messes up the metrics because the rest of them do have line item accounting. And I can look at net numbers by code and by payer and all that kind of stuff. And you cannot if they don't.
So you would recommend
everything has an asterisk.
Convert people if they can. Like, just
yes,
get all
and I'm worried because I feel like it's becoming normal to not. Like, I feel like the DPOs, whatever you want to call them, they're all DSOs, whatever. But the people that retain ownership and don't force conversions on people, I've been at least part of a few that start that way and then change the tune when you realize, like, so my motto is like, a lot of people don't want to do a lot of change at the office level and like disrupt how they've been doing, especially if it's a high EBITDA practice that already has been doing really well. And they just want like some support or some rev share or something. They don't want to disrupt that. But the problem is, like you say, nothing's going to change. We're not going to do anything. And so my motto is like, you can change it one time and then have the office be upset and have to get used to things once. Or at the corporate level, headquarters, whatever you want to call it, you're messed up forever, all the time. So you can either like, you have to choose, like, do we want to rip the Band-Aid off and just have the initial change management issue? Or do we want to have corporate have to get 25 reports for everything? And then when you have like an audit, for example, it's not fun. It takes a long time to get a lot of details.
And even if you did have every software the same, there's still the need for the other work that you're doing of all the custom reports. It just makes that part of it much easier to do. You still are going to have the desire for custom reports. The cookie cutters are probably still not going to cut it. Right?
Yeah.
But,
the difference is
makes your job a lot easier at that point.
Yeah. The difference is currently I have to write the report 12 different times because the logic is typically different. There's a couple that kind of overlap in some places, but for the most part, I have to write every single piece of code, every single piece of logic 12 different ways to cover all of them and do like this huge union query.
And so that's even with what you said was a unified schema. It still is different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because you have to have different logic per software. Because some of them count starts by a ADA code. Some of them, the ortho software count starts by a contract date. So like a lot of the ortho softwares don't charge out consults or anything on their ledger. They're not ledger based. They're treatment card based. You have to do logic for those for consult tracking. And then you have to do consult tracking versus ADA codes and other softwares.
Brutal.
So yeah, it's a lot.
That was going to be one of the questions that I asked you. I wanted to get into like strategic best practices as the data inside of dentistry continues to evolve. So one best practice is, if you can, if possible, to have a standardized practice management software, that will make a big difference.
And not just standardized software, standardized SOPs as well. Like you need as much standardization and centralization as you can get, like centralized RCM, possibly a call center, whatever you can do to standardize as much as possible. I know that's not the answer people want because it's not, everybody wants to kind of like not tell everyone what to do, especially if they're, DPO, like I said, they want to let the office do as much as possible, let the owners make the decisions. But it's rough. You have to choose between like clean data and reporting and then autonomy. Like you can't have both done well.
Yeah.
So you can do it both.
Unless you have a Jordan Trentacosta, then you can do it.
Yeah, that's true.
No, it's still rough. There's an asterisk on everything. I have a whole document that I write. It's like, these are correct for these offices, but on these offices, you have to do like X, Y, and Z to calculate it properly or whatever. I have a whole document on it so that people understand if people are looking at it for the first time, like they understand what they're looking at.
Yeah, that's rough. But so basically what you're saying is rip the Band-Aid off, make them change. They'll hate you for 6 months, but then after that, it'll be fine. Right.
Yeah, hopefully. As long as I set it up correctly too, because that was the other thing. It's like you can set up the software itself. Like whenever you buy a software and you go to set it up for your practice, you can set it up totally different than the person next door. Like, so it's also about standardizing setup initially too. And then if you're starting from scratch, the best advice I have is to choose one carrier name for insurance for each thing. Because right now, the issue that has bothered me the most over my whole career has been standardizing insurance names. So you'll have like Delta Dental of Minnesota, Delta Dental of Colorado, Delta Dental of this, and then also all the misspellings of those, or like uppercase versus lowercase, and then like spacing differences. And so if you just have like an open text field that's no standardization on that whatsoever, it makes it really difficult to get any insights out of carriers, like payer reporting. You basically have to make like a reference table where you do like a formatting of all of those, and that's very difficult to do without missing anything.
Is there not like a unique identifier that goes in the practice management system for each one of those carriers, or no?
You can if you standardize appropriately, but realistically right now you can just go in, unless you have it locked down security wise, you can just go in and type in whatever you want. And it has like a payer ID for like the submissions, but that's not the same for each Delta Dental. So,
oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, it's like different per state of Delta Dental and which plan you have. So you can create unique identifiers like on the back end at least. But for the front end, it basically to get it to go in the right category, it's a bunch of regex. Like,
yeah,
it's not.
That's rough.
Jordan, I can hear the pain in your voice when you're talking about these things, like the hours and hours of late nights trying to solve these problems.
Well, also it's like nobody understands how much work it is until you actually show somebody. Like, you'll get asked like, all of my career, you get asked like, when is this going to be done? And you're like, well, I can give it to you now, but it's ugly and you're not going to get the insights from it. So the question isn't like, can you do it? The question you're asking should be like, am I going to be able to use this data for anything other, like anything that actually is actionable insights? Like, I don't want to see a list of top payers where the top 100 includes 30 different Delta Dentals. I ran into recently one that was called Dental. So I'm assuming that would be Delta, but like, so what I had to do when I made my initial query for the categorization of the carriers is I have an extra one's other. So anything that doesn't meet each requirement, if there's anything left, it's like a then other. And so I have to scrape the other ones all the time just to make sure nothing fell through or we didn't put a new one in. People enter new ones all the time. So it's an ongoing maintenance project, which is never ideal, but you can set up some automation for it.
I think we have a buddy, Jake, that's trying to solve this problem. Lewis Chan. He showed me a demo. I was like, oh, baby, this is Jordan would like this because it's just consolidated. And he finds, he tries to use the payer ID to match up to where it's supposed to go and then updates it so that it's all centralized across all the locations so that it unifies them. But
for another episode, we'll bring Lewis on. He can share us.
But payer IDs are also an open text field. So
they can totally mess it up. Yeah. If you get the payer ID wrong, though, can they actually even submit for insurance?
You can submit paper claim. Just not, it'll catch it in like dental exchange or whatever clearinghouse typically. It'll catch it if it's wrong. Yeah. But it's a good place to start probably. But
so Jordan, what advice besides standardizing, and maybe that's the biggest advice that you could give, but what advice would you give group practices? What should they be doing today to try to stay ahead of this data, the data challenges, and trying to be able to get the actionable insights out of their data that they are going to want and need?
I mean, I think that having your own warehouse is a big deal. Like, at least, even if you're using an out-of-the-box analytics software, like ask them if you can have access to your own data. Because there's a lot of questions that you can answer quickly if you have a console where you can actually do SQL queries. So having access to your own data is huge. Like, maybe I don't want to edit their UI. Like, I don't want to touch anything in theirs because that's, their product. But if I need to do like a quick poll on something, if I want to see, like one of the ones we've done before at a previous company was, I wanted to see every single patient who is in between the ages of 7 and 17 who has not had an ortho referral yet. So that way they can work the list in the offices trying to get referrals done by the AAO standards. That's not something that would just be available out of the box in the analytics software, because that's not something that like you would have to have a code that you charge out like standardized wise for ortho referrals or the referral source or whatever. But again, the referral sources are open text too. But if you have like an ortho consult CDT code that you made, like an in-office code, you can track it like that. So that would be something you could pull in 5 minutes if you have access to your actual raw data or unified data. But you wouldn't be able to do that with an analytics platform. And even if you could, it would go through a dev cycle. So that's assuming they have multiple clients. If they had like only you, maybe you get a little bit quicker. But most of them at this point have at least a few clients, right? So you have to go through and wait at because you don't have like a developer assigned to you individually. You have to submit a ticket. It goes through a dev cycle, goes through however many weeks it takes for it to be your turn and then for you to build it and a lot of stuff. So it's a lot quicker when you just have access to your own data. So I highly recommend doing that. Even if you're not doing a bunch of custom coding all the time, it's just like really easy to be able to go pull those things if you're just curious or you just think of a metric off the top of your head that you want to see. It doesn't take 4 to 12 weeks to get. You can do it within the same week typically.
I love that. So pick a practice management system that's going to give you access to the data, raw access to the data.
Yes. Or at least an analytics vendor who will.
Yeah.
That's one of the issues that you see is like definitions wise, like you just get this analytics platform, right? But you typically do not get given like a data dictionary or a KPI dictionary that tells you what the definitions and calculations are or which fields they're using for what. That's not normal to get. But you need it because if you're trying to explain to any kind of shareholders or even the offices what they're looking at, because a lot of them maybe don't match exactly with what the software says on a report. Like for example, Denticon on their new patient report, they do it by first patient, like the first visit ever, which is great. That's the way I like to do it too. But in Denticon, it counts if you charge out a broken appointment code because they use appointment statusing in theirs for broken appointments. But a lot of offices like to track it via like the D9986 and 9987 codes. But that counts it in Denticon on their report as a new patient. So if somebody misses their very first appointment and they charge out a missed appointment code, that's a new patient in Denticon. But that's not, obviously. So we had to write custom code to exclude those two codes. And that wouldn't be there in an analytics platform.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. Yeah, they just missed it. They were like, oh, if there's a completed appointment and it's got a procedure code, then we're good. Turns out the procedure code was a missed appointment.
Yes. And then also what I found out that's super fun also in Denticon is if you complete an appointment from the appointment screen, it marks it as a completed appointment status. But if you charge it out from the treatment plan or just the ledger, it can be charged out. When you click on it, it pops up as the same exact screen. But if you don't click it from the appointment book, it doesn't complete it. So we had this, a couple of offices that were just like, had no completed appointments. And we're like, what is happening? Like something's wrong, something's set up wrong. So I went into actual UI to go confirm. And nope, all of them are sitting in like operatory status. I'm like, what's happening? I had them walk me through what they're doing. And they showed me, I'm like, wow, you're doing it right. I don't know what the problem is. And so we put a ticket with Denticon and that ended up being what it was. It's like, they're like, well, they're not charging it out from the appointment screen. Like it's the same screen. It's just a matter of how you click to it. Like, wow. And then we were like, okay, well, can you like mass go complete them? And they're like, yeah, it'll be like a 12-week project and cost a lot of money. Like the alternative is like you have the office go through individually. Yeah.
Yep. Oh boy,
terrible.
Yeah.
Bunch of weird nuances.
Some best practices to stay ahead. Get a data warehouse. Small plug for Kala, right? Reach out to Clint and I. We'd love to help you with that. Shameless plug. But then we talk about standardizing. Find a Jordan Trentacosta. That sounds like a best practice if you can. But seriously though, what would you say are some of the benefits to those organizations that are trying to stay ahead of the game? Like what are they going to experience because of their investment in having a data warehouse as opposed to those that are not?
Well, so you can start looking at like predictive analytics type stuff too. So once you get all your normal KPIs and like all the little things you want, you can start looking at like doing some machine learning fun stuff where you start predicting like who's going to show up to their appointments and who isn't based on what they've done previously. And then also with your own warehouse, you can start integrating more than just PMS metrics. So you can have data coming from your phone vendor. You can have data coming from, I've seen people hook up to like their finance software, like Intact. And then you can start having, previously I have built a live P&L essentially. Obviously you don't release it to the offices until it's finalized, but then you can see like allocation issues. Because one issue I ran into when I was a director of ops, I asked so many questions to my staff accountant that they ended up giving me a copy of the GL every single month because I would ask so many questions about like, why is this like this? How did you calculate this? But if you see allocation errors, because there was one time where my supplies percentage was insane. It was like 10%. It should have been around 4%. And I was pulling out the GL and they had allocated some stuff that was supposed to be CapEx to my supplies, which is wrong. But it was because it was Henry Schein. So if you have like a Henry Schein equipment account, a Henry Schein service account, and a Henry Schein supply account, but those all go in different places on the P&L. Some don't even go on the P&L. They just go on the balance sheet. So because they were Henry Schein, I guess the accountant just allocated it to supplies. And so like those are the kind of things you can catch if you're looking at a live P&L versus waiting till they're closed, because you can't go back and change the books necessarily. So if you catch it ahead of time, like you can make future entries to correct it, but it's not going to change that month. So if you can catch it ahead of time before it's finalized, then that's super helpful. So I think that's one of the biggest perks that people are starting, like DSOs are starting to get interested in, is integrating outside metrics that aren't just PMS. And a lot of the analytics vendors only do PMS metrics, like 99% of them. So I think it's starting to be a newer thing.
I love what you said about being able to do these predictive analysis, right? Like in any organization where you're leading a team, there are KPIs that you're going to look at that are leading indicators versus an outcome, right? So like once the month is closed, the outcome is set in stone. You can't do anything to change what that outcome was because you didn't know what other KPIs were leading to what that outcome was going to be. Whereas if you do have some predictive analytics or things, a live P&L like you're talking about, things like that, you could see mid-month, like, oh man, these trends are potentially going to result in the outcome that we don't want to have. And you could make changes proactively so that the outcome at the end of the month is better, as opposed to being reactive and just say, oh, well, we missed our number in this month, so that stinks. But we can't do anything about it because we didn't know until the month was done. Whereas if you do have these types of tools, if you are putting in this type of effort, investing in this technology, you can, I'm not saying it's easy, but you can get to the point where you can see some of the things that are coming and make changes to make sure that your growth is more consistent.
Yeah, and if you're about to put in like a huge supply order, you're not running low on something. If you see that your supply budget is already blown for the month, it's all allocated, then you could choose to put it in the first of the next month or something if you're not running behind. And then a lot of my office managers all the office managers at a lot of the roles I've had in ops are bonus off of EBITDA. So if something's allocated wrong, I would basically have to go to upper management to kind of like advocate for their bonus, be like, hey, like they totally made their bonus, but this was allocated incorrectly. So like if you walk this back, they made their bonus. So a lot of that is touchy because you're messing with people's money at that point.
Wow. So what do you have any warnings that you would give to any organizations that are maybe falling behind in this, that haven't made it a priority to at least have a strategy when it comes to their data and analytics?
I mean, just so you're probably missing a lot of business insights. There's a lot of things that you can look at that are not available in the regular analytics software out of the box. There's a lot of custom metrics that you're kind of missing out on. And part of it, the predictive analytics stuff is really interesting because you can try to like predict seasonality a little bit more. If you see like how many cancellations you typically have. One thing that I like to look at is cancellations by day of week and like appointments by day of week too. It's interesting because I thought for sure there would be like more cancellations on Fridays and Mondays, but like the top cancellation day that I've seen is Wednesdays. No clue why, but it proved me wrong. I was like, oh, I know which days have the most cancellations. Of course, it's Fridays and Mondays, but not at all. So it's interesting to see that kind of stuff. And I mean, maybe not everybody cares as much about that kind of stuff, but you can build schedules around that information. Like if you know that people are, coming in on Fridays, and you can also look at like the analysis if you're opening on Saturdays, what that looks like. Like if you're opening on Saturdays, is it worth your time? You can start looking at like how much each employee is costing you. If you have like an HR software, like are they sitting on the clock? Are they, doing anything? You can look at provider days worked in different ways. So a lot of companies look at, if doctors had anything charged out, but then others look at like if there was an appointment in specific columns. So you can kind of like tailor how you want to do that and how you want to calculate it all. And I think that if you want to stay ahead of the game, you have to have customization like that, because otherwise you're not really getting any insights other than, like you've seen the out of the box solutions. It's like, okay, have production, collections, dollars per patient. Like, okay. But if you don't know to separate some of that stuff, like if you have a mixed specialty and you're looking at dollars per visit, like ortho makes 0 sense to look at dollars per visit because they're coming in a billion visits in between for adjustments that are all $0. So like you would look at more like dollars per patient there. Whereas with regular dentistry, GP, pedo, you would look at dollars per visit. So when you push it all together in one unified place, it doesn't really make sense to look at them all together.
Wow. It's such a large problem to solve. It's fascinating.
There's so many moving parts with it. Like there's no silver bullet. There's no way to make it perfect, but you can do the best you can. And the best you can is custom warehouse.
That was going to be a question for, I think Clint had mentioned this before. Clint, you want to ask the future? This is Clint's favorite question to ask.
Yeah, just like, what do you see for the future for dental data, or what would I even like to ask, like, what would be your ideal future for the way, do we access data or things like that? Any insights you have around the future of dental?
I would like to see more open integration availability, because I feel like a lot of the cloud-based software, because everyone wants to move to cloud at this point, right? But a lot of the cloud-based software is very closed off, and they kind of have built it to be like a monolith where they have all of the features internally. But the problem with that, is getting someone to change their software is all, like their PMS is already really difficult and a lot of change. But then asking them to change every single vendor they currently have as well, you're going to get a lot more clients if you're not acting like that, not forcing that. So I think a lot of the PMS are the problem here. It's like they don't want to be open and integrate with anyone, even like Open Dental now, closed dental. And that's not really affecting the integrations necessarily as far as like overall, but it does affect like their preferred list and all that stuff now. Because Open Dental used to be like the end all be all of integrations. You could do kind of whatever you wanted. And I get part of why they closed off, like having somebody's bad data completely ruin a database is not ideal. But there's not really any cloud-based ones that are super open, or they want to charge you to access your own data, which is insane. And if it's a third-party vendor trying to get the data, some different companies want to charge so much that it makes it like cost prohibitive to even have an analytics software, like cost prohibitive to the analytics vendor to even be able to support it, because the cost is so high, like computationally, that it's not really a point.
Yep, they're preaching to the choir, Jordan. I agree.
And I was like, that we just recorded an episode about that and that. And that.
Yep. Yeah.
These are going to be repetitive.
Exactly.
No.
It's fine.
It brings, more attention to all of these things, because they all support each other. It's all one big puzzle, right? So.
Well, you think they're all the same until you really get into it. Like, it's just coming from my ops background. Like, I didn't realize how much nuance there was with it, because we only had like one or two. I had to learn a lot of them because we were onboarding and converting them. So I would have to learn how to use one. And I helped a lot of the conversion. I would help a lot of the PMS vendors, like kind of data map. One of the conversions we did was from QSI, like DOS-based QSI. So my team was really excited to convert, which is like the first conversion I've ever done where somebody was like, yes, please convert us. Because they couldn't use a mouse and had to tab through fields, and they were super excited to go from that to cloud-based straight through. But I had to learn all these different softwares because of conversions, and they're so wildly different. It's insane. And I just didn't know. And then when you get on the back end and start looking at the nuances there, it's like, I don't even understand how some people function with all these different ones. Like, it's very difficult. There's just so many things different between all of them. Like Open Dental doesn't have collection adjustments. They just like all of their payments are net. So if you're looking at like an overall consolidated view of plenty of offices, and then you have a mix of Open Dental in there, the collection adjustments look really low. And you're like, great, no one's doing refunds. They are. It's just netting the payments out like a negative payment instead of an adjustment. So it's just kind of all over the place. And you just have to learn to kind of take the issues where they are and just agree to disagree on some of it.
Wow. Well, Jordan, thank you so much for being with us.
Sure.
So much good information. As I listen to you speak, I'm amazed at not just the wealth of information that you've gathered about dental data. Like the self-proclaimed dental data nerd title is so true, because like you're just rattling off codes and everything. It's super impressive.
Yeah, this is the stuff that stays in my brain. I can't remember anything super important, but I have all this information, like random code stuck in my head.
Yeah. I mean, just the other day, I asked her a question about some reporting issues, and she's like, oh, look, there's a bug in this practice management system. And she can show me like on this report, it's allocated here. On this report, it's allocated. I'm like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
How did she
know? You have to run 6 different reports to get the actual item here, the actual real number. But what's funny is that the offices don't even know this though. So they think that they're reporting on the right numbers, and like all these little one-off offices, especially as we know EcoSoft, but like the ones that have those, they don't know what they're doing when they set it up. So they think they're reporting appropriately, and half their numbers are gross numbers because the adjustments are not going anywhere.
Wow.
Yeah, I don't know if they really give you much training on those kind of things of where the data is. I don't know. Like when you buy the software, I mean.
Yeah, sure.
So
you just buy your software from the vendor that sells supplies. No. Gauze and software.
I love it.
Thank you so much for joining us. You're awesome, and we are lucky to know you. And maybe we'll have you back on again when there's some other data thing that happens. We'll have you come. Like we just talked about we talked about the Open Dental going closed source. Like maybe next time there's some breaking news, we'll just do it with Jordan.
Yeah, that you can provide commentary. Yeah, I love it.
Live commentary. Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for joining us. Thanks everybody. We will talk to y'all next time. Thanks so much.
Thanks.